Jasmeet Sethi is a senior advisor for Ericsson Consumer Lab based in Sweden. He's traveled extensively around the world to study consumer culture and behavior, and is a frequent speaker at international industry conferences such as this. Today he's going to talk about inaccuracies in market research data from the buyer of that research. Jasmeet, it's all yours, sir.
Another MRMW, so it's really exciting for me. I mean, the last time I was in Chicago speaking on MRMW, and we had a full house as we have people out here. So really excited to be here, and we'll be talking about a subject which I think is debated a lot. I think we had a session yesterday as well, talking about lies. And from our perspective, we believe that deception is very rampant today. There was some research which was done back in 1996 by some psychologists, and they said that men and women, on an average, would kind of lie to about 30% of people that they interact with on a daily basis. Well, these men and women are actually consumers for all the market research that we do today. So it means that it impacts our business as well. And you see these all small lies that we have. Some relationships are like magnets of deception. A teenager and a parent today, you would see how lies kind of fly here and there in that sort of relationship. So we wanted to come here and share our story with you about how it impacts our business of market research, and how is that we can rectify some of the inaccuracies, the way the market research is done today, what is broken, and maybe hope that we can fix it in time before it gets to impact our business in a big way. Now, if you guys, some of you were back in MRMW in Chicago, but before we get into that, a little bit about Erickson Consumer Lab. We are the Consumer Insights Division based within Ericsson Sales and Strategy Unit. We just celebrated about 20 years of studying consumer behavior. And unlike most big brands and firms, we don't keep research in-house. So you could easily go on to ericsson.com/ConsumerLab, and all our market research, all our strategic tactical projects are going to be available out there in the public domain. So a lot of it is all about building the brand, building thought leadership. In fact, how our CEO, Hans Vesperi, and in MWC Barcelona took consumer insights, and that was the key kind of points that he would use often to open his presentation. So we are actually seen as a big brand building effort from Ericsson internally and within the stakeholders that we have. Now, MRMW Chicago, and if some of you guys were there, last time around I kind of showed up a slide talking about how our business and how we invest in research is kind of shifting. And this is a slide which really talks about the share of market research investments by methodology at Ericsson. Now, I've spent about 6 years in Asia. I was based in India handling high growth markets. And for the past 7 months, I moved from Asia to Stockholm, which is the headquarters, a very beautiful city, now handling the global part, looking at consumer insights. So I can speak from both sides of how I look at the region in Asia and how I look at the global headquarters. And what is very visible from this slide and what's happening within Ericsson is right now is that we're spending a lot on traditional qualitative today. Almost 40% of our investments and time is spent on qualitative research. But what's also interesting is the sort of investment that's going into behavioral data, passive data that we talked about yesterday as well. Almost 20% of our investments going there. And then, of course, 10% is being transitioned to mobile qualitative. Now, here comes the interesting part. So remember, I moved 6 months back. I moved from being in India to Stockholm, and then I started analyzing our numbers, looking at how much are we spending globally, looking at matured markets, which is Europe and North America. And this one is going to be a really interesting one and would open up a lot of insights. So you see the share is still a very high proportion of about 30%, which we are still doing on traditional qualitative work. But look at the mobile part out here. It's just very insignificant. Just 3% of our investment is going into mobile research today at a global level. So what this really tells me is a very important fact, that when you're talking about mobile market research, Asia is the place to be. And when I looked at this, sort of disparity that's happening internally within us, it made me believe that maybe this is the case with most leading research buyers and suppliers. And that point was validated by the GRIT report, the Green Book report, that was released in fall 2014. And there were interesting points that were released in this report, which actually validates what we are seeing happening within Ericsson and our share of market research investments. The first interesting point was when it comes to mobile surveys used by researchers. Remember, the GRIT report is all about, I think, about 2,000 respondents. 70% of these are suppliers. The rest 30% are buyers of research, so it's a big enough sample, industry-wide, region-wide, talking about what's happening in the market research industry. And if you look at the numbers out here, in terms of mobile survey used by researchers, just 25% in Europe, 33% in North America, and 33% in the rest of the world. So the rest of the world is essentially largely Asia and Australia. So you see Asia really coming up when we talk about mobile surveys. What does it look like in terms of mobile qualitative? Well, mobile qualitative is actually strongest outside of North America and Europe. So when I look at these statistics, it kind of reinforces the fact that if mobile MR is going to be big, it will probably go mainstream to start with in Asia, and then, of course, we will have Europe and North America to follow. So these are important points to look out in terms of how the industry is going to shape forward and where we are headed. Of course, we want to innovate. There is a thirst to go ahead and innovate into new methodologies as well. And from that perspective, we were asked at Ericsson to go down to Silicon Valley, seek some new inspiration about how we can innovate, not just in market research, but also in our business. So, we and a group of people from Ericsson were sent to San Francisco, California, and the first meeting that we got was with Clara Perkins. Now, for people who know Clara Perkins and people who don't, it's one of the biggest venture capitalist firms. It's one of the firms which is behind one of the biggest brands in the world today when it comes to AOL, Amazon, Twitter, IBM, and a lot of other big brands that they have funded with a lot of seed investments and early stage investments that have gone in. So the first meeting that I had in Silicon Valley was with Randy Komisar. Now, he's the partner at Clara Perkins, right? And this guy is really phenomenal because what we wanted from him was really to sit down with him and understand what is that really clicks with Silicon Valley. Why is that innovation really happens in Silicon Valley? What's so unique about it? Why is that when we take startups and put them in Stockholm, or we take startups and put them in Singapore, they don't really flourish the same way that they flourish in Silicon Valley? And when I spoke with Randy Komisar, this guy is really interesting. If you talk about his story, now Randy Komisar is of course one of the partners at this firm, and he's been a veteran as far as investments are concerned. For the past 2 years, Randy hasn't had a single successful investment. His last successful investment was back in 2011. It was only up till February 2014 that he had one single successful investment. And that single investment was when Clara Perkins sold a company called Nest, which is a smart home maker, to Google. Now, Clara Perkins invested $20 million in Nest, and guess what? Their return on investment was $400 million. Phenomenal. So this guy hasn't made money for the firm for the past 2 years, has been sitting with the firm, and at this stage, he suddenly had a big investment, which has been very successful, and he brings peace to all the other partners in the firm. It's really interesting how these guys really operate, because if we were in these shoes, imagine if he hadn't had a success for the past 2 years, we would be out of jobs. And I sat down with him and I tried to understand, what is it that really keeps you guys going? And he tells me that, Jasmeet, 90% of the time, the bets that I make fail. But the 10% of the bets that I make really make it very big. And those 10% of the bets are the ones that really make our business work today. And one of the things that he said to me was that the unique thing about Silicon Valley is that the valley can absorb failure. Failure is not attached to your CV. And that's a big point, right? Because if we go back and look at how we operate in market research, or not just market research, in any business that we operate, we are so shit scared about failure. Whereas in Silicon Valley, failure is not attached to your CV. It's taken for granted that you would have failed in some of your startup ventures, and you're back again asking for capital money for your next seed investment. And that's taken for granted that your plan A is always going to fail. And the fact is, you need to always have a plan B. When I looked at this, I got back to my colleagues and I say, hey, you know what? This guy is coming up to something very interesting. He's saying that the valley can absorb failure. Can we absorb failure? And guess what? The consensus was no. We can't absorb failure. That's how big brands really work today. And that's the harsh reality. We can't absorb failure. But we can avoid failure, right? And the way that we work in market research is also to some extent continuously innovate in the way we work, but avoid failure. We cannot absorb failure the way the venture capital is done. So all this bullshit around, something is broken in the market research industry and we need to have a startup mentality and we need to go ahead and innovate. Well, it might work for some people where, it doesn't work for us. We don't have the capacity to absorb failure. And that's the harsh reality for us. But how are we going to avoid failure is really go about, scouting for some very innovative startup companies that are out there in the market research umbrella. And one such innovative market research company that I'm going to talk about is this company called Velinx. It's a company started by two PhD candidates from Amsterdam School of Business, really bright. It started off as an academic project, and I'll talk a little bit about what they are doing and what they have done. But when we met them in such a forum like this in a conference, we were really excited because these guys were on to something really brilliant. They had a big idea. They did not have any credentials backing them. They had not worked with any of the big firms to go back and say that we had Unilever or P&G behind us. They were coming up with an empty canvas to us and saying, we have a bright idea, we want to work with you. And at that point of time, we thought this was excellent. We thought this was a perfect match. Like you feel in a marriage. When you're getting into a marriage, you feel, oh, great, this is the perfect match. But guess what? When you have two different companies of different sizes and different culture, a big firm like Ericsson and a startup company which works at a very different pace, well, a perfect match can turn into a miserable match. And that's what happens. Somebody told me marriages don't really work when one partner is good and the other one is miserable. The fact is, marriages work when both are miserable. Right? So ever since we've got into this relationship with a startup, we have made our lives miserable. And I'll tell you why we have made our lives very miserable. When startups come on to work with big clients like Ericsson, this is the perception that they have of us, right? So the startups are really all about agility. They can't wait on the sidelines, and they expect us to run in the similar fashion like us. So those guys are the greyhounds, and we perceive startups to be very sexy, glamorous, and we want to work with them. But we, of course, can't run like them. So this was how the startups perceived us when we started this relationship. So Velinx perceived us to be running as fast as they would do, come on to decisions, commission a project, go ahead, big scale it up, and get a big bag of money from Ericsson. 6 months down the line, I went up to the guy who was running the startup, and I had a formal chat with him and asked him, what do you feel about Ericsson? And he tells us, this is what I feel about Ericsson. A sloth, which runs at 0.003 miles an hour. The fact is, he tells me, you guys are inflexible, you're slow moving, contracts take a lot of time to negotiate, it's just bullshit, we don't want to work with you. And that's a reality. And I went back to him and I told him, maybe the expectation setting didn't happen the correct way. Because what you need to know is, it's going to take us a lot of time to really channel you and absorb you in our system. we know how to work the ropes within our different stakeholders. We need to sell the idea internally, not just with ourselves, but with our teams, with our sourcing departments who don't understand how research is being sold. Because I remember going up to a sourcing department guy and asking him, here is a new startup, we should work with him. And the first question he asked me, how many boxes are we going to buy? It's like, we're not buying boxes out here. We're doing research. They don't understand what we are after, right? So we know how to understand the ropes, but we are not going to run the same way and sprint the same way as startups expect us to sprint, right? And that's a harsh reality again. So all those you guys who are expecting to bag big contracts from big firms, well, you need to lower your expectations in terms of timelines that you're really looking for, because it might not happen the same way that you would expect. So now coming on to the big problem. So we have discussed exactly what the startup was all about, and how we kind of got them into the system. But the reason why we got them into the system is because every time we spoke with our customers, this is what was happening. So how many of course you're going to lie again out here, but I know this is true, right? We say a prayer every time we have to change some pricing, sometimes here or there, right? That's a harsh reality. And statistics prove that, right? So McKinsey did some sort of a research, and they said that fewer than about 15% of the companies do systematic pricing research, right? And pricing is so critical. A 20%, here and there can actually impact your profitability. It's in fact only 5% of Fortune 500 companies have a dedicated pricing function, right? And that's an important point. And if you think that's an acquired skill, because I've spoken with a lot of CEOs and CTOs, and they tell me, oh, we have guys who can do pricing, But the fact is only 9% of business schools actually teach pricing. So it's not an acquired skill. There needs to be hours and hours spent behind doing systematic research when it comes to pricing. You can't go after and expect that intuitively, things are going to work out with you on the pricing front. And this is a problem that we were trying to solve for us at Ericsson, because we were advising leading operators in the world on their pricing strategies when they go out and launch product and services in the market today, right? And of course, what we were hearing is the same thing. Oh, of course, we do this with intuition. But we were, of course, doing a lot of pricing research back home, in our markets. So how we were doing this is really trying to crack pricing today is looking at innovations as far as mobile internet is concerned, right? So what you see on the screen right here are two innovations, recent innovations that have happened in the US market. One is, of course, coming from T-Mobile, which is called the data stash, which is you carry your unused mobile internet data that you haven't exhausted in a month over to the next month, right? So that's a recent innovation, and they're very disruptive in the market today. They do a lot of innovations in the mobile internet space. Now, other customers, the other operators, asked us this question. Okay, what is the value of this innovation? Can I probably take this innovation that T-Mobile has done in the US market and adapt it to my market? What's the value of that innovation? How much should I price such sort of offerings in my market today, right? And we said, okay, yeah, that's very simple. We can go out and do some pricing research. We can come back with pricing thresholds. We can give you, fancy simulators, demand curves, you name it. We have everything under the roof. Right? So we did exactly that. We came back, we did a lot of pricing research across the globe. We came back with a lot of data, and we said, okay, great. You should go and launch this product in XXX markets, and you're going to get good dividends out of such services and concepts. But guess what? When Whalings came in and they saw that we were doing such pricing research in the market, their proposition was, okay, wait a minute, right? We have something that can really help you. And what they were suggesting is really a game-changer move. What they were suggesting was, okay, we're going to change the way willingness to pay is actually measured today. And what they were suggesting was a setup which is an experimental auction. Now, the concept really comes from a scientist called William Vickrey, who's a Canadian scientist who won the Nobel Prize behind one of the most advanced auction systems, which is even being used by eBay today. And these two guys, these PhD candidates, were working on the same concept. Though what eBay uses as experimental auction is called proxy bidding. right? And they had an adaptation of this, which is called victory auctions. And what happens in a victory auctions, and the rules of the game are very, very simple, right? So there is one bid per bidder, which is one bid per respondent that needs to be placed for a particular product or a concept. All bids are sealed, so you cannot know what others are bidding in the system. You could have one or multiple winners for a particular product or service, and the winner pays the second highest price. Now that's the key point, and I'll come on to why this happens, why the winner pays the second highest price and not the highest price in the case of a single bid auction. And the auction closes in few hours, right? So it's not typical market research where you wait for 3 weeks to get results. We are talking about 12 hours max out, and you get the results in as far as pricing is concerned. So what we have done really is did pricing with a twist. So we are not putting consumers in a hypothetical situation and asking them hypothetical questions about how much are you willing to pay, or is it too expensive, or is it too cheap? This is as close as it can get to actual decision making. Think of Kickstarter for research. It's like a crowdsourcing platform where respondents go in for bidding on particular concepts or products, and products are actually sold to consumers for the second highest winning price. The advantage of this particular methodology is that you're most likely to be very truthful about how much you're bidding and how much do you really value the product. And if you don't believe me on this, we went back and we looked at all the data that we had collected from the traditional surveys that we had done. You talk about a model, we have it. Talk about PSM, Gaber-Grangers, and all the fancy models that we had, and we kind of calibrated and looked at what we were getting from those models and what we got from these auctions. Guess what? What haunted us was this single statistic, 258%. So people who were responding in a traditional survey in a hypothetical setting were kind of quoting willingness to pay, which was 258% higher than what we got from the auctions. And that's a reality. Because you are putting them in a hypothetical situation and asking them some weird questions. So what it brings us to believe really is that pricing should be based on the value to the consumer and not to the cost, which is most likely how pricing is really done in the market today. Right? And this is really, this shook us internally because we were collecting a lot of data. We were advising our customers based on this data. And guess what? All our data is inaccurate by the tune of not just 5, 10%, by the tune of 258%. And that really shook us. And we said, okay, this needs to stop. We need to stop all the pricing research that we are doing. And we need to take a step back. We need to look internally what we are doing and how we need to evaluate the system further. So this was, of course, a pilot that we had done with Whalings in Netherlands with about 500 users, experimented, and these were the results that we had. We, of course, now scaling this to other markets. We are even talking with operators who might actually, in future, sell mobile internet plans, not just with a flat rate pricing, but they would ask you to bid for a mobile internet plan. They would ask you what is the maximum price that you are willing to pay, and you will be competing against the rest of the bidders for a plan. So it's a new way of selling products and services, selling products and concepts. The value is the seller gets the maximum price, the customer feels that he's in control. You don't want to slap yourself thinking that you overpaid for something. And that's the reason why we are selling the concept or a product at the second highest price and not the highest price that you have bid today. When it comes to, most of your statistical guys out here would question me, okay, yeah, but what about brand price trade-off and all the stuff that we do in conjoint? How does this methodology really works? Well, this is an example of how the methodology would really work. These are two examples of the visual stimuli. Of course, we have sanitized this to some extent. We're not going to disclose what brands we went ahead with. But these are two examples of the visual stimuli that we presented, right? And both the concepts talk about different aspects and different features of a shared data plan today. So the concepts that you have would see a shared data plan, a shared mobile internet plan with 2 devices, and again a shared data plan with 2 devices again. But the reason, the difference between the 2 concepts actually is in the details. If you look closely, one of the plans kind of talks about speed varies between 25 megabits per second to 50 megabits per second. And on the other plan, we have a speed which is guaranteed speed of about 50 megabits per second. So how does the price really vary in such a scenario, right? What we saw that there was a 2x premium that people are willing to pay when the price was guaranteed rather than when you communicate that the speed is going to vary. What is even more interesting that we saw, because we had another sort of visual stimuli that we presented as an auction where we gave no information whatsoever on the speed. And what was interesting at that point of time is that the concept in which we had no information on the speed fared much better than the concept with varying speeds. So you're much better off not communicating what speeds are you likely going to get on a mobile broadband or a mobile internet plan than going out and communicating that the speed is going to vary between, 25 to 50 megabits per second. So you see how different combinations of different visual stimuli that you tend to auction off can give you different price points, which might really help you uncover how much people really value and what do they value in a particular concept, right? So we've done a lot of these adaptations today, but the key really was how to get to the lie, right? And this is important from our perspective as market researchers when we talk about agility. It took us just 1 week from proposal to deliverable working with Wailings, right? No longer 6 months, 3 months of a timeline that we're talking about when looking at market research. 66 seconds average time to complete a single auction. And this is including 6 questions that we posted to consumers asking about how much are they paying for a mobile data plan today and some additional demographic data that we had. And almost 36% of these guys were taking this on the mobile phone itself. And that kind of correlates with the 66 seconds average time to complete on the surveys, right? So we're not talking about 20-minute surveys or a pricing module that takes about 5 to 10 minutes out here. 66 seconds is now the benchmark in terms of pricing. And that's how quickly you can actually get to willingness to pay by completely changing the game as far as how willingness to pay is to be cracked in the market. So, we have, of course, gained a lot out of it, and this has actually shook us to an extent that we had to go back, scrap off all our existing contracts that we had with suppliers, which were doing pricing research for us, and then go out and rectify a lot of the data with Wailings. The fascinating parts about this research is that the sample that we are using is an unpaid sample. These are not incentivized respondents. People are participating in auctions because they feel they get to know about a new product or a concept. And the fact is they get to pay the second highest price and not the price that they are bidding. And that's the big incentive for them. First, you get to know about new products and concepts. These people are really enthusiasts. They want to know what's coming up in a market. And then the fact that you're not paying the highest price. You're paying the second highest price in an auction, which is a big enough incentive for them to go ahead and participate. The second biggest one is that you react in a blink period. So forget the fact of interpreting those 4 questions that you usually ask. Is it too expensive? Is it too cheap? Is it cheap? You are kind of totally taking that away and getting a response from the user in terms of his maximum willingness to pay considering everything that he sees on the screen in front of him. So that's the blink period, which is very, very important as far as decision making is concerned. Then, of course, the typical problem of working with Conjoint, too many options, how do you really fit that in? Well, a visual stimuli. So we had these guys design a creative for us and ad for us, which can be displayed online to the consumers, how the product is eventually going to be sold, and what is the communication that's going to go out. And it's not that you had a big sort of a module that you would present with XYZ features as you would have in a Conjoint, right? And the last one, of course, is that this is as close as it can get to real decision making. You're not putting the consumers in an alien environment where you're asking them hypothetical questions about how much you're willing to pay, right? So let me end with this thought that you need to avoid the nightmares, because really, for me, looking at market research, when I go back to my manager and told me, you know what, we did our pricing research, and it's actually 258% off for what we recommended to our customers. I'm glad that I was not fired. Right? So let's avoid the nightmares as much as we can. The idea is to scout for those sort of startups which can really take us ahead in terms of dealing with such inaccuracies. And that's where we are right now today. We have been given the mandate for each team to at least have a seed money of $5,000 to go ahead and scout for new market research startups that can really help us reevaluate how we are working with market research today, right? So the truth is that the truth doesn't cost anything, but lies will cost you. Bullshit. I mean, the truth does cost you, right? We paid a lot of money to do this, right? And the fact is, if you don't make that investment, well, the lies are going to cost you very dearly. Thank you so much, and love to hear from you guys about your nightmares when we can on Twitter. Thank you.
Bit of a tsunami there, I think. Bit of a tsunami. Quick one from me.
Yeah.
If you won't want to answer, I'm sure. Are you willing to disclose some idea of your total MR budget? And is it going up or down?
Well, I think, from a perspective of investment in new methodologies, we have definitely seen our MR budget go up. I can't disclose the numbers, of course, at this forum, but I can say that, as I said in my last slide, that getting to the truth does cost you, and we have to make investments in order to rectify inaccuracies. And the fact that now teams have a seed budget of about $5,000 just to do a pilot, right? So once they do a pilot with such startups, then they need to find a business owner in the organization who can pump in more money to scale the research at a bigger level. So yes, we are seeing MR budgets kind of increasing.
Hello, I've got the mic, so. My name's Wale from Confirm It. I really liked your explanation of pricing based on value. Value is a subjective notion, and how do you ensure a level of consistency with such a subjective notion of value?
Yeah, so there is a lot of literature behind why we actually chose the Vickery auction over all the other methodologies that are present out there. I'm not saying that the other methodologies are not up to the notch. Of course, they work in different scenarios and for different objectives. But in our scenario, where we really wanted to get as close to the pricing thresholds, we saw that we were putting consumers in a lot of hypothetical situations, having them to think about value, where they were in most cases lying about their true willingness to pay. And hence, we had to take a step back and look at this methodology, which really puts you in a position of actual decision making. It puts you in a situation where you have to take a call and bid something, the maximum value that you're willing to pay for a product. You eventually know that if you are going to win the auction, you're not going to pay the maximum amount. So there is no incentive for you to lie, which is the case in a normal auction. You would do that because you would expect that a product is being sold at product should be sold at much lesser than what the others value as additional bidders. But in this sort of a methodology, the incentive is that you're less likely to be lying about the value that a particular product. We have seen people who don't bid in the auction as well. So that's, again, an insight for us. In this case of an experiment, only about 1/3 of the respondents really bid in the auction. So we knew exactly how much of the market we can go out and capture and how much of the market really values the product or the concept in the first place. The rest of the 70% of the market didn't even care about the product or the concept, and they didn't want to participate in the auction. So I agree, value is subjective, but I think this is as close as you can get to really cracking the value part.
It's Piers Lee from BDRC Asia. The problem I have with this approach is that you are asking consumers to say how much they're willing to pay. And I have done research, not in previous companies, where we've done the same thing, and they usually come much lower than what the product is going to be retailed at. But you see, my issue is that in a real retail environment, a price is given, and consumers will react to that price in light of other offers in the market, which may be priced at a similar level. So, and I think, for a lot of consumer decisions, that's how it is. There's a price given to you, will you pay it or not, rather than, how much are you willing to pay, like in auctions. So, I mean, there are auctions, but that's not how most products are sold. Most products are sold in a retail environment where a price is given. So, my question is, how does this really emulate the real retail environment and the way pricing is done?
Exactly. You could have different adaptations of the auctions out here. You can even set a reference price if you have a reference benchmark price from the market in terms of what the competition is selling the product for, which gives you, in a way, some understanding of, okay, the existing pricing is X dollars. Can we probably, if we were to go out with such an offering in the market, can we command a bigger premium in the market, or is it that the most of the market is not interested? So the whole concept of whether this takes care of usual methodologies like a brand price trade-off or other methodologies, there can be a lot of adaptations that can be done to the auction, and you can manipulate it the design in a way that can fit with your objectives. In this experiment, we actually were able to manipulate the design by changing the brand. So we had the leading operator in the market, we had the second leading operator, and the third one with different market shares, and we were able to manipulate the design and really figure out for which operator the customer is willing to pay much higher premium for the same offering. Because when the brand comes into the picture, some of the brands are perceived to be much more innovative and commanding a higher premium. So you could, to your question, we could manipulate the design in a lot of ways, the way the auction is done.
Hi, Jasmeet. I'm Anila from Instats Research. Great presentation. I had a couple of questions, one of which Piers has just asked, which is about the marketplace. But more than that, just wanted to understand the logistics of how this research was exactly conducted. So did you recruit people who were in the market looking to buy a data card?
Okay, so that's a very good question, actually. In this experiment, though, Waylings already had a panel which was available in Netherlands of users, and the panel is representative of the mobile market, of the smartphone user market that we had. And we were able to go out to these panel respondents, asking them if they wanted to participate in the auction or not. So, and now what we're looking at is that we probably will not need a panel, because we could run these auctions on different sites. So you would see an auction on Facebook or on YouTube, and we will be able to go out and do this in a big online environment where the reach and the scale is going to be much bigger, or even with subscribers of a particular operator in a way. And for people who don't bid, well, we realize they're not in need of such an offering in the market, and it gives us a view of how much we can capture.
But what about awareness? Because a very critical, I mean, this presumes that everyone is aware of the offering, and often awareness is a reason for products fail in market. So I guess that's.
Yeah. So if you saw what I said with the 66-second response, there are about 6-7 questions which give us a lot of background information in terms of awareness, demographics, what is the existing sort of propensity to pay that they're paying. And with the series of auctions that we are going to run, we capture a lot of information that helps us go back to look at, okay, from a lifestyle perspective, how is that you spend probably on an automotive category, or how much you're spending on the other area. So with those questions, we can gather awareness. Have they had such exposure to a market?
No, I was talking about awareness of the new offering, because if you run it on sites which are like Facebook, etc., it's a function of what is the kind of, what is my share of voice. But I mean, I guess that's something that could still be in progress. I need to just understand one last thing, that therefore you would be showing one product per per consumer? One concept per consumer?
Yeah, it's one concept per consumer.
But it's anchored in some kind of a conjoint where it's a BPTO
Yeah.
kind of a framework.
It's a conjoint, it's a random experiment, and
Okay.
It has a predictive algorithm behind it, which can ensure that we are able to show, different concepts to different people.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, and that was a brilliant presentation.
Hi there, thank you for a great presentation. My name's Camilla from Coke. Yeah, I wanted to know, obviously you believe this auction methodology is, superior, and this one tells you the truth versus your previous one. So have you seen, results in the market from this? As in, you've seen higher take-up of products that have been tested in this rather than your previous methodology?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, we went out with the experiment, and now we are in discussions with some of the operators right now, talking about how we can launch this live where people can actually buy products and services directly from the consumers. In the past, when we have done pricing research, eventually when we have recommended that some brands can garner a premium, we have not seen that happen. And that is a reason for us to believe that what we were gathering at that point of time is probably not up to the mark out here. I cannot predict what's going to happen when this goes live and we are able to get this to the market. But most likely what is happening is that what you're bidding is what you're going to pay eventually as well. And this gives the seller the maximum capability to realize the highest potential, because it's an auction. It's not a flat rate pricing. And some people are going to bid more, some people are going to bid less, so the demand curve is going to be very, very different. And we are hopeful that the methodology might yield much more dividends than what we have seen in the past approaches, where pricing has largely been in reaction to the competition or the cost that is there for a particular product, or it's more likely intuitive sort of levels that you are going to set, and not based on any systematic, experimental, or scientific evidence behind it. We are just going to go live. This was an experiment, yeah. So we're just going to go live with this.
Hi, I'm Linda from Temasek Poly. Jasmeet, I really like this new methodology. It's exciting. How much of the context plays a role in deciding on this? Because I'm thinking if there's a crisis, we had a smog couple of years ago, so prices of masks would have gone up. So if I were bidding, I would bid very high because of the immediacy of the need. Will you then consider taking at different phases, looking at the changing context, and also the cultural differences?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a very good question, and you're very correct. The context changes, the timing of the auction also changes, and that's the reason why the plan is really to do a series of auctions which give us some way to mitigate the context. Maybe pre-Christmas, you would find the pricing is really at a discounting level. After that, people are willing to pay more. So we want to do a series of auctions and then get the results and analyze. There's a lot of qualitative research that goes ahead of this to really understand the buying factors as well. So that gives us a little bit of understanding to us as well.
The good news is that we've got Jasmeet immediately after coffee as part of the panel.
Yeah, please. Yes.
Pramod from R&B India. Just an observation, Jasmeet. You said this is an experiment and nothing has been scaled, to really verify your methodology. Maybe the data which you've collected with your traditional research, the data may have been wrong. Otherwise, the error cannot be 300%.
Well, I'll be happy to come back again in the next MRMW and share exactly, I would be really glad if that turns out to be the way, because then I have my job secured.
We cannot, means nothing against your methodology, but the error cannot be 300%. I am sure for that.
Okay, let's talk about that then. If you can rectify, we'll give you the data and you can work on it.